Biblio Studio presents Unlock Your Mental Abilities, a work created by Oscar González for Biblio Studio. Chapter 1. The Hidden Key in Your Brain. Most people go through life without realizing they carry within themselves a mechanism capable of transforming their lives, enhancing their abilities, and expanding their limits far beyond what they thought possible. When we talk about mental abilities, we are not referring to memory tricks or lightning-fast calculations like those of a mathematical prodigy. We are talking about the capacity to think creatively, to learn faster, to remain calm under pressure, to train your attention, and to generate profound changes in the way you feel and act. Your mind is the software that directs your body, and the good news is that this software can be rewritten. It is estimated that your brain has around 86 billion neurons. But what is truly astonishing is not the number, but the way they communicate. Each neuron can establish thousands of connections with others, forming networks more extensive than any city ever built. These connections are not static. They change, strengthen, weaken, or form new ones depending on what you think, what you do, and what you experience. Do you remember the first time you learned to ride a bike? At first, clumsiness was inevitable. Falls, wobbly pedaling, hesitation. However, with every attempt, your brain reinforced the circuits necessary to coordinate balance, vision, and movement. Until one day, without even realizing it, you were pedaling naturally. That process is called neuroplasticity, and it is the foundation of this book, The Myth of the Rigid Mind. For centuries, it was believed that the brain was a fixed machine, that after a certain age, it could only deteriorate. It was common to hear phrases like, "You can't change, that's how you were born," or "A crooked branch will never straighten." Nothing could be further from the truth. Today we know that your brain changes until the very last day of your life. Think about it. If you were truly a rigid structure, how could you learn a new language at 40, recover from an accident, or even adapt to new technology that once seemed incomprehensible? Every time you do so, your mind is proving it can reinvent itself. In 1915, a Canadian soldier named Walter Yeo suffered severe burns to his face during World War I. He lost practically all his eyelids, and his life seemed condemned to social and emotional darkness. However, a pioneering surgeon, Harold Gillies, attempted an experimental procedure, transplanting skin to reconstruct his face. Against all odds, Walter's brain learned to interpret those new nerve endings as his own. He not only regained mobility, but also recovered his sense of identity. Why does this story matter here? Because it reminds us that the brain can adapt not only physically, but also psychologically. Just as Walter relearned to control muscles that were no longer the same, you can reprogram emotional responses, attitudes, and beliefs that once seemed fixed. Your thoughts are not just sparks in the void. Every time you think of something, you trigger a cascade of chemical reactions in your brain. If you repeat a negative thought, for example, "I can't do this," you strengthen that neural network. But if you decide to train your attention on a different thought, "I have the resources to learn," you begin to build a new circuit. A curious experiment conducted at Harvard University revealed something striking. One group of people physically practiced a simple piano sequence for 5 days. Another group only imagined it mentally without moving their fingers. When comparing their brains, both had developed similar changes in the motor areas. This demonstrates that your mind does not distinguish much between what you imagine and what you do. Both processes modify your brain. The key is awareness. You may be asking yourself, and how do I use that key? The first condition is realizing that you already carry it within you. Awareness is the switch that turns on the process of change. Many people repeat habits automatically. They react with anger, doubt themselves, or self-sabotage without realizing it. When you pause and observe yourself, you break free from autopilot and open the possibility of acting differently. Here, I want you to remember a phrase from the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. The door to happiness opens outward. One must step aside to let it open. In this context, stepping aside means observing yourself, recognizing your patterns, and deciding which doors you want to open in your mind. If you decide to embark on this journey, do not do it as someone expecting immediate results, but as an explorer. The explorer knows there will be sunny days and unexpected storms, but each step brings him closer to unknown territories. That is the attitude that will unlock your mental abilities, curiosity, patience, and the commitment to keep experimenting. Now I want to ask you a question that will serve as your compass. What mental ability would you like to awaken that you believe you don't have today? Maybe it's greater concentration, more creativity, more calmness, or more confidence. Whatever it may be, keep it in mind, because throughout this book, we will be building the tools to make it flourish. Chapter 2. The Myth of Mental Limits. We've all heard phrases like, "I'm not good with numbers," "I don't have a good memory," or "creativity is only for artists." These phrases, repeated aloud or silently, become invisible chains that limit what we believe is possible. But what if I told you that those limits are not real, but mental and cultural constructions we've accepted without questioning? The idea that the human mind has a fixed ceiling is one of the most harmful myths we carry as a society. It makes us settle, prevents us from trying, and, worst of all, robs us of the excitement of discovering what we are capable of. For centuries, science believed that people were born with a set number of neurons, and that over time, all we could do was lose them. Under this pessimistic view, education focused on filling a container that could not change shape. If you weren't good at something in school, it was simply assumed you had no talent for it. This myth was reinforced by the traditional educational system, which measured everyone with the same yardstick: standardized tests, rote memorization, and little attention to different learning styles. Many of us grew up believing we were bad at certain subjects, when in reality, we just needed a different approach. The trap of labels. When someone tells you as a child, "You're distracted," "You're slow," or "You're not good at this," your brain registers it as truth. These labels become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You act in accordance with what you believe about yourself. And what's most curious is that you don't only accept external labels, you're also capable of labeling yourself with thoughts like, "I'm too old to learn," or "I don't have the discipline it takes." However, these phrases do not describe your reality, but your perception. And what you perceive is not always what is. In 1953, a young psychology student named Henry Molaison, later known as Patient H.M., underwent surgery to treat his epilepsy. Doctors removed part of his hippocampus, and from then on, Henry lost the ability to form new memories. His case was tragic, but it also revolutionized science. It showed that the brain is not a static box, but an organ with specialized systems that could be understood and potentially trained. Thanks to Henry Molaison, scientists discovered that memory, learning, and identity were not mere talents or gifts, but moldable functions of the brain. This revelation opened the door to modern neuroscience and began dismantling the myth of fixed limits. Today, we know that the brain transforms with every experience. Neuroplasticity, That power to reorganize itself means you can learn to play an instrument, speak a language, practice meditation, or solve complex problems, even if you've never done it before. A clear example is bilingualism. Research using MRI scans has shown that people who learn a second language, even in adulthood, develop greater gray matter density in areas related to memory and attention. It's not that they were born with a special gift. They trained their brains until they shaped them. How your limits are fed. Your limits do not come from your DNA or a destiny written in stone. They are fueled by three main factors. 1. Culture. What your environment believes is possible. If everyone around you thinks intelligence is fixed, you're likely to believe it too. 2. Repetition. Every time you reinforce a limiting thought, your brain turns it into a neural habit. 3. Fear of mistakes. We were taught to avoid errors, when in reality mistakes are the most powerful tool for learning. The Russian psychologist Alexander Luria, little known outside academia, documented in the mid-20th century the case of a man named Solomon Cherysheevsky, who possessed an apparently unlimited memory. He could recall lists of hundreds of words, numbers, or sounds with ease, even decades later. The surprising part was not only his ability, but that he was an ordinary person, with no prior training. His brain had simply developed synesthetic associations, a blending of senses that enhanced his memory. The story of Cherysheevsky reminds us that what we consider normal about human abilities may only be the tip of the iceberg. Perhaps you won't develop photographic memory, but you can certainly surpass what you believe is your limit. To begin freeing yourself from the myth of mental limits, I propose 3 practical steps. Question your labels. Write down a belief you have about yourself, such as, "I'm bad at concentrating." Ask yourself, when did it originate? Who told me? Is it a fact or just an interpretation? Redefine mistakes. The next time you fail at something, mentally repeat, "This mistake is just another brick in the construction of my learning." Expose yourself to the new. Every time you try something you've never done, learning a recipe, playing an instrument, solving a puzzle, your brain expands. Make novelty a habit. You are more than your past. The central idea here is clear. You are not the sum of your limitations, but the sum of your possibilities. Who you were yesterday does not define who you can be tomorrow. Science has already proven that your mental abilities are not static. They are dynamic, expansive, and malleable. As the poet William Blake said, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it truly is, infinite. That infinity is within you, waiting for you to dare to open the door." Chapter 3. The Brain's Secret Language. If you've ever tried to communicate in a foreign country without speaking the language, you know how frustrating it can be. Gestures, sounds, improvised drawings, and still, half of the message gets lost. Now imagine that within you lives a silent translator, a system that doesn't communicate with words, but with electrical impulses, emotions, and experiences. That is the brain's secret language. Understanding it not only allows us to translate what we think and feel, it also gives us the key to consciously shaping our minds. Because the brain is always speaking, even if you don't listen. The code of connections. Every thought you have is, in essence, a conversation between neurons. These cells send chemical and electrical signals across tiny bridges called synapses. The more often you repeat a thought or an action, the stronger that connection becomes, like a path in the forest that opens up through constant use. Here's the interesting part. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a useful path and a useless one. If you spend years repeating, "I'm bad at public speaking," that phrase will form a circuit just as strong as if you had practiced a speech every morning. The brain only strengthens what you repeat, not what serves you best. Words that shape realities. Perhaps you recall some childhood advice like, "Don't be silly," "Be quiet, you don't know anything," or "Let others do the talking." Even if said without malice, these words can lodge themselves as invisible commands in your system. Neuroscience confirms it. Words don't just describe reality, they also create it inside your brain. A study at Emory University showed that listening to metaphors such as "she had a velvety voice" activates sensory regions of the brain related to touch. In other words, language is not neutral, it literally changes your neural experience. If simple words can alter your perception, imagine the power of the thoughts you repeat every single day. The brain doesn't just speak in words and connections. Its main grammar is emotion. What is tinged with emotion is remembered more vividly. That's why you remember where you were when you received shocking news, but not exactly what you ate 10 days ago. The neurologist Antonio Damasio explained that emotions work as somatic markers, physical signals that tell your brain what is important and what is not. Put another way, emotion is the fluorescent highlighter of your memory. This has a powerful implication. If you want your brain to learn something new or change a habit, you need to involve emotion in the process. Theory alone is not enough. There must be an emotional spark that imprints the learning. In 1964, a Canadian neurosurgeon named Wilder Penfield carried out an unexpected experiment. While operating on patients with epilepsy, he electrically stimulated different areas of their brains. To everyone's surprise, the patients began to relive memories in vivid detail, childhood smells, forgotten conversations, even entire songs. The fascinating part is that these memories weren't lost, they were simply dormant somewhere, waiting for the right signal. Penfield showed us that the brain stores far more than we think, and that access depends on the internal language we use. How to talk to your mind. If the brain has a secret language, how can you use it to your advantage? Here are some keys. 1. Repetition with meaning. Repeating empty phrases isn't enough. Combine repetition with emotion. Saying "I can do it" while feeling enthusiasm generates more impact than repeating it mechanically. 2. Mental imagery. The brain responds strongly to the visual. Mentally rehearsing a situation activates areas similar to actually living it. 3. Personal metaphors. Create symbols that carry meaning for you. If you think of your concentration as a laser beam, your mind will grasp that image better than an abstract explanation. The power of silence. Interestingly, the brain's secret language doesn't always require words. Silence also communicates. When you meditate or simply close your eyes to breathe, your brain shifts into slower wave states, alpha or theta, that enhance plasticity. In those moments, the inner language becomes clearer and more receptive. Next time you catch yourself saying, "I can't," or "That's just who I am," ask yourself, who taught me those words? Do they belong to my true language, or are they inherited phrases? By questioning them, you begin to clean your inner dictionary and write a new one. As the Austrian writer Elias Canetti said, "The words one chooses are always more revealing than the ones one thinks one has chosen." Pay attention to yours, because they are the notes with which you compose the music of your brain. The brain doesn't communicate with logical speeches, but with connections, emotions, and images. That is its secret language. And if you learn to consciously speak it, you can reprogram your mind to serve you instead of limiting you. Your task is simple. Turn your inner dialogue into your ally. Make every thought, every word, and every emotion messages, that reinforce the version of yourself you want to build. Remember, your brain is always listening to you. The question is, what story are you telling it? Chapter 4. The Battle with the Environment. If you think about it, much of your life is shaped by what surrounds you: your family, your group of friends, the city you live in, the culture in which you grew up. The environment is not neutral. It influences you, conditions you, and even programs you. The clothes you choose, what you consider right or wrong, the type of job you aspire to, almost everything carries the imprint of your surroundings. The problem arises when the environment becomes an invisible cage. If you don't question it, you can spend decades acting according to others' expectations, not your own. It's like living in a theater where you perform a role someone else wrote. Our brain is designed to learn from the environment. From a young age, we imitate what we see: how to eat, how to speak, what is considered successful. That ability to adapt is wonderful, but it can also become an obstacle if what we've learned limits our possibilities. For example, if you grew up in an environment where everyone repeated that money corrupts, you may unconsciously associate prosperity with guilt. Or if no one in your family practiced sports, you might think today that you weren't born for that, when in reality you just never saw it as normal. The environment shapes your initial beliefs, but it doesn't have to dictate your future. The Rosenhan experiment. In the 1970s, a psychologist named David Rosenhan conducted an experiment that shook the medical world. He sent 8 healthy volunteers to psychiatric hospitals pretending to have only one symptom: hearing vague voices. Once admitted, they behaved normally, yet all were diagnosed with mental disorders and remained hospitalized for weeks. What did this experiment prove? That the environment and labels influence us far more than we realize in how we are perceived and treated. Even though these people were healthy, the context turned them into patients. The same thing happens in everyday life. Your environment can reinforce an identity that isn't truly yours until you end up believing it yourself. The invisible contagion. Psychologist Nicholas Christakis at Harvard University studied how social behaviors spread. He discovered that emotions like happiness or sadness spread through social networks and groups of friends, even beyond direct contacts. If a friend of your friend becomes depressed, the chances increase that you'll also feel down. This reminds us of something essential. The environment doesn't just dictate what you think, but also how you feel. That's why it's so important to carefully choose who you spend your time with. The environment as teacher, not dictator. The environment can be a teacher, but not a dictator. To regain control, you need to become the screenwriter of your own story. Here are some practical steps. 1. Identify inherited patterns. Make a list of common phrases in your family or environment. Example: in this house, no one studies, or dreams are for the rich. Ask yourself if you want to keep writing under those rules. 2. Create micro-environments. You don't need to move cities to change. You can create small environments that support you: a reading corner at home, a study group, a quiet space. 3. Surround yourself with expanders. Seek out people who live life the way you want to live it. Their example will serve as a constant reminder that another reality is possible. The paradox of the environment. Here's a fascinating detail. Although the environment shapes your mind can also shape the environment. Think of people who, despite growing up in adverse contexts, created new possibilities for others. One example is Wangari Maathai, the Kenyan who, in a country devastated by deforestation, began planting trees in her own garden and went on to found the Green Belt movement with more than 50 million trees planted. She didn't just resist her environment, she transformed it. The real battle is not eliminating your environment, but training your autonomy in the face of it. Every time you consciously choose what to believe, what to do, and with whom to share your energy, you strengthen your muscle of mental independence. A simple practice. Spend 10 minutes a day observing your thoughts and ask yourself, do I think this, or did my environment pass it on to me? That question, repeated consistently, will help you separate your inner voice from external ones. Your place in the world. The environment is inevitable. You will always be surrounded by stimuli, cultures, and people. But your power lies in deciding how to respond. You can be a passive product of what surrounds you, or an active protagonist who selects, filters, and transforms what you receive. Remember, you don't have to adapt to every scenario like a chameleon. Sometimes, the greatest show of intelligence is daring to be the fish that swims against the current. As anthropologist Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. You can be part of that group, starting with your own inner world. Chapter 5. Your body doesn't rule you. You decide. You've surely experienced it. You decide to stay calm, but your body speeds up. You promise to eat healthy, but your hands reach for the cookies before you even think. You want to wake up early, but your body drags you into hitting the snooze button. It seems as if the body has a life of its own, as if it were the true master of your destiny. In reality, what happens is that your body holds memory. Over the years, it has memorized emotions, reactions, and habits until they become automatic. It's like an employee who, after repeating a task so often, no longer asks for instructions. He performs it out of habit. The key question is, who's in charge? You or your automatisms? Every emotion leaves physical traces. Fear accelerates the heartbeat. Sadness shrinks posture. Anxiety disrupts breathing. If those emotions are repeated, the body learns to reproduce them even without a reason. That's what happens when someone, after years of stress, feels neck tension even when no longer under pressure. Neuroscientist Candace Pert discovered that emotions are not just mental. They are stored as molecules in different parts of the body. That's why sometimes, when reliving a memory, you can feel a knot in your stomach or warmth in your chest. Your body speaks its own language, and if you don't listen, it will end up making decisions for you. The tyranny of habit. Bodily habits are powerful because they save energy. Imagine if you had to consciously think about every step while walking. It would be exhausting. The problem is that the brain applies this same logic to everything. If you repeat a reaction, like smoking when anxious or turning on the TV when you get home, it becomes an automatic program. Over time, the habit overrides your intention. In fact, studies at Duke University show that more than 40% of our daily actions are not conscious decisions, but automatic routines. In 1930, psychologist Barhus Frederick Skinner trained pigeons to press a lever and receive food. The interesting part came later. When he began giving them food randomly, the pigeons developed repetitive behaviors like spinning in circles or pecking aimlessly. They believed those actions brought the reward, even though they no longer did. Sound familiar? Humans are not so different. We follow emotional and bodily routines that once worked for us, even if they no longer make sense today. We cling to them because the body has them recorded. How to regain control. The first step is to remember that you are more than your body. Your conscious mind can step in to re-educate those physical memories. Here are some practical exercises. 1. Observe the impulse. Next time you feel an automatic habit, like checking your phone for no reason, don't stop it right away. Simply observe it and say, "Now, my body is asking for this." That pause creates space to decide. 2. Breathe differently. Breathing is the body's remote control. Try inhaling deeply through your nose for 4 seconds, hold for 2, and exhale slowly for 6. Do this several times a day, and you'll notice your state changing. 3. Break the routine. Introduce small variations into your days. Walk a different route, switch hands when brushing your teeth, listen to new music. These changes disrupt bodily inertia and force your brain to wake up. The mind that shapes the body. A surprising example comes from the sports field. Researchers at Cleveland State University showed that people who only imagined lifting weights without moving a single muscle increased their muscle strength by 13% after weeks of mental practice. The body obeyed the mind, even without physical action. This finding confirms that you are not a slave to what your body remembers. With mental training, you can even rewrite physical functions. It's not about fighting your body, but about turning it into an ally. Think of it as an obedient child who learns certain habits, some useful, some not so much. If you give it new instructions with patience and consistency, it will learn again. One practical method is to associate physical sensations with new experiences. For example, if you want to cultivate calm, pair your meditation practice with a physical gesture, such as placing your hand on your heart. Over time, that gesture will work as an anchor. Your body will recognize it and enter calmness more quickly. You have the final say. The essential message of this chapter is clear. Your body doesn't rule you, you decide. Yes, it holds memories and habits, but it is also designed to learn anew. What today seems automatic and uncontrollable can become flexible and renewed. Remember these words from the philosopher Epictetus: "No man is free who is not master of himself," and mastery begins by recognizing that your body is your tool, not your jailer. You have the last word. Chapter 6. Time as an ally, not an enemy. If there's something we are all obsessed with, it's time. We feel that we don't have enough of it, that it slips through our fingers, that we are running after it like a train we never catch. But what if I told you that time is not your enemy, but one of the most powerful tools to unlock your mind? Time doesn't just measure life, it also shapes how we experience it. And the relationship you have with it largely determines your level of stress, your ability to learn, and your potential for personal transformation. Prisoners of the clock. We live trapped in 3 forms of time: the past, the present, and the future. The problem appears when the past becomes a prison of memories, or the future an inexhaustible source of anxiety. You've surely noticed it. Some people constantly relive past mistakes, as if they were invisible chains. Others mentally anticipate everything that could go wrong, creating worries that never actually occur. Both forget the only thing that is real, the now. Neuroscience supports this idea. MRI studies show that when you relive a negative memory, your brain activates the same areas as when you experienced it for the first time. In other words, your body feels the same pain again, as if it were happening once more. Something similar occurs when you anticipate a problem. Your body releases stress hormones even though nothing is happening in that moment. In 1929, physicist Edwin Hubble, yes, the one the telescope is named after, discovered that the universe is constantly expanding. This finding forever changed the way we understand time, no longer as a linear, immutable river, but as something dynamic, in constant motion. Why is this relevant here? Because your brain is also a universe in expansion. You are not condemned to repeat the same patterns. You can expand into a different future if you learn to use time as an ally instead of living it as a prison. The present is the access point to change. You can only modify your thoughts, emotions, and decisions in this instant. Neither yesterday nor tomorrow are available for action. The only reality is this second. It may seem like a simple idea, but it is profoundly transformative. When you train your mind to return to the present, you reduce activity in the amygdala, the fear center, and increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and calmness. In other words, you stop reacting and start creating. Strategies to reconcile with time. 1. Rewrite the past. You cannot change what happened, but you can change how you interpret it. Ask yourself, what did I learn from this? By doing so, you turn a memory into a resource. 2. Deactivate future anxiety. When you notice your mind running ahead, ask yourself, is this happening right now? That simple question brings your attention back to the present. 3. Anchoring practice. Choose an everyday object, a cup, a bracelet, a stone, and use it as a reminder to return to the present every time you see or touch it. Time is also essential for consolidating new skills. Every time you learn something, your brain needs rest intervals to reinforce the connections. This is known as the spacing effect. That's why studying a little each day is more effective than trying to learn everything in one night. A fascinating example comes from violinists, studied by psychologist Anders Ericsson. He discovered that the most virtuous players didn't practice more hours than the rest, but instead structured their time into intense 90-minute blocks followed by rest. The secret wasn't in constant effort, but in using time wisely. The paradox of time. Curiously, the more present we are, the more time seems to expand. Think of a day when you traveled to a new place. Every detail was vivid, every experience seemed to last longer. In contrast, when you repeat the same routine every day, weeks fly by unnoticed. This happens because the brain registers time based on novelty and attention. The more conscious you are, the richer your experience of time becomes. I'd like to propose a simple exercise. Spend 5 minutes a day pausing to observe something ordinary with full attention. It could be your breathing, the taste of a fruit, or the sounds of the street. Don't underestimate this act. It's a way to train your brain to inhabit the present and free yourself from the tyranny of the clock. You choose how to dwell in time. Time is not an executioner chasing you. It is a stage where you decide how to act. You can be a slave to memories and worries, or you can use the present as a point of creation. Remember the words of philosopher Rabindranath Tagore. Time is the wealth of the poor, and the poor man who knows how to use it is richer than a king. You already possess that wealth. You only need to learn how to use it. Time can be your most loyal ally as long as you choose to live it consciously. Chapter 7. 3 Brains, 1 Destiny. When we think of the brain, we usually picture it as a single organ, a gray mass that holds all our secrets. But in reality, within you coexist 3 different brains, each with its own language, priorities, and way of seeing the world. And although they sometimes seem to fight among themselves, their common destiny is to guide you toward the life you build. Understanding them is not only fascinating, it is essential if you want to take the reins of your transformation, because until you know who is speaking inside you, you cannot decide whom to listen to. The reptilian brain, the guardian of survival. The first to appear in evolution was the reptilian brain, responsible for the most basic functions: breathing, regulating temperature, keeping you safe. Its logic is simple: survive. When you feel sudden fear and your heart races, it is this brain pressing the alarm button. It doesn't care if your goal is to give a speech or start a project. It only wants you to flee from what it interprets as a threat. The problem arises when the reptilian takes over. Then your life shrinks into routines of safety. You eat the same, think the same, do the same. You guarantee survival, but you renounce growth. The limbic brain, the craftsman of emotions. The second level is the limbic brain, the territory of emotions, memory, and social bonds. Here lie the experiences that shape your life. If a song has ever made you cry without knowing why, it was your limbic system recalling something your conscious mind had forgotten. This brain seeks connection and pleasure, but also avoids pain. It is a great motivator, but also a saboteur if left unchecked. For example, it may push you to eat sweets because you deserve it, even though it isn't the best for you. The neocortex, the architect of possibilities. Finally, there is the neocortex, the jewel of human evolution. It is the rational, creative brain capable of planning, imagining, and solving complex problems. This is where your most ambitious ideas and most inspiring projects are born. The neocortex is like an architect designing skyscrapers, but if it cannot convince the reptilian and the limbic, those blueprints will remain only on paper. The tension among the three. Many of your inner struggles stem from the clash between these three brains. Your neocortex says, "I want to run a marathon." Your limbic brain replies, "I'd rather stay home watching movies, that's more comfortable." And your reptilian brain shouts, "No way! Running that much is dangerous for survival." Sound familiar? That is why you sometimes feel like you are two people in one. In truth, it's three voices living within you. In the 1960s, neuroscientist Paul MacLean popularized the theory of the triune brain. Although science has refined the model since then, his intuition was revolutionary, understanding that we are not a single I, but an orchestra of systems in constant negotiation. A real-life case that illustrates this dynamic is that of Phineas Gage, a railroad worker who in 1848 survived an accident in which an iron rod pierced his skull. Miraculously, he did not lose the ability to speak or move, but his personality changed radically. He became impulsive, irresponsible, incapable of planning. The damage to his neocortex revealed how each part of the brain plays a distinct and essential role. Three brains, one destiny. The key is not to silence one of the three, but to integrate them. The reptilian ensures that you live, the limbic ensures that you feel, and the neocortex ensures that you create. Together they form a symphony that, when well conducted, can unlock your full potential. To achieve this integration, you need to train internal communication. 1. Listen to your reptilian. When you feel fear, ask it, "What are you trying to protect me from?" Thank its intention, but consciously decide whether the threat is real. 2. Negotiate with your limbic. If an emotion dominates you, observe it without judgment. Ask, "What story are you telling me?" This prevents it from dragging you away uncontrollably. 3. Activate your neocortex. Use conscious thought to design new paths. Write, plan, imagine. Give voice to the architect within you. Practical exercise, the inner assembly. Imagine calling a meeting among your three brains. The reptilian raises its hand and says, "I want safety." The limbic adds, "I want to feel loved and happy." The neocortex concludes, "I want to grow and build." Your task is to find a plan that serves all three. For example, if you decide to exercise, the reptilian gains health, the limbic receives endorphins of well-being, and the neocortex enjoys progress. When you reach this balance, your life aligns. The destiny of the three brains is the same, to help you live fully. But only if you assume the role of orchestra conductor. It is not about silencing any of them, but about giving them a place in the score. Remember, you are not a slave to your impulses, your emotions, or even your thoughts. You are the space where they all coexist, and you can decide how to harmonize them. As writer Hermann Hesse said, "Inside us live several men, and the art of life consists in living with them." You hold the baton. Chapter 8. The Power of Attention. We live in the age of distraction. Phone notifications, endless incoming emails, social media designed to capture us, the constant noise of the modern world. Everything competes for your attention, and yet attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. What you attend to grows, what you ignore withers. Attention is like a flashlight in the dark. Wherever you point the light, you see clearly. Everything else fades away. Learning to direct your attention is learning to direct your life. What is attention, really? Attention is not just concentration. It is the ability to choose among millions of possible stimuli, which will be your focus at any given moment. Your brain processes around 11 million bits of information per second, but you can only consciously attend to about 40. That means your conscious reality depends on what you choose to look at. Do you realize the power this implies? You don't live in absolute reality, but in the version your attention selects. In 1999, psychologists Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabry conducted a famous experiment known as the invisible gorilla. They showed a group of people a video of two teams passing a basketball and asked them to count the passes made by the team in white. In the middle of the game, a man in a gorilla suit walked across the scene, pounding his chest. Surprisingly, nearly half of the participants didn't see him. They were so focused on counting passes that their attention filtered out the gorilla. This experiment shows that what you don't attend to simply doesn't exist for you. How many invisible gorillas are in your life right now because your attention is trapped in the wrong place? Attention as energy. Neuroscience tells us that neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you focus your attention on something, you strengthen the associated connections. It's like watering a plant. Where you pour water, it blooms. Where you don't, it dries up. If your attention is centered on worries and complaints, your brain will strengthen the circuits of anxiety. If you direct it toward learning and possibilities, those circuits will grow. Attention doesn't just observe, it creates. The problem is that your attention is limited and highly coveted. Tech companies know this and have designed platforms to capture it. Every notification, every infinite scroll, every like acts like a magnet for your mind. It's not just a lack of personal discipline. You're fighting industries that invest millions in figuring out how to keep you hooked. That's why reclaiming your attention is not a luxury. It's an act of mental freedom. Strategies to train your attention. 1. Eliminate the superfluous. Set aside moments of the day to turn off your phone or put it in airplane mode. At first it feels uncomfortable. Later it feels liberating. 2. Train with the simple. Observe an everyday object, a candle, a cup, for 1 minute without letting your mind wander. This exercise strengthens your focusing ability. 3. Mindful action. Turn ordinary activities, washing dishes, walking, showering, into mindfulness practices. Bringing your focus to what you are doing now is like lifting weights for your mind. 4. One focus at a time. Multitasking is a myth. Your brain switches tasks quickly, but each jump drains energy. Choose one thing, finish it, then move on to the next. Attention and happiness. A Harvard University study discovered something revealing. People are happier when their attention is on what they are doing, regardless of the activity. In other words, you may feel greater well-being washing dishes mindfully than daydreaming about a beach trip while working. Happiness doesn't depend so much on what you do, but on where your attention is. When you learn to direct your attention, you become the architect of your mind. You stop being a victim of external noise and begin to consciously choose where to invest your energy. Remember the words of William James, pioneer of modern psychology. The supreme education consists in directing attention to what matters. That is your mission, to learn to focus, sustain, and protect your attention as the vital resource it is. Your life is what you decide to pay attention to. Chapter 9. Meditation without mysteries. The word meditation often evokes very specific images: monks sitting for hours, people in robes inside distant temples, incense burning, and mantras repeated endlessly. And although those forms exist and have value, meditation is not a privilege reserved for Eastern sages, nor is it an inaccessible practice. In reality, meditation is mental training, as practical as exercising a muscle. It's not about emptying the mind, something impossible, but about learning to observe it and direct it. Think of it like learning to drive a car. At first it feels strange, but with practice it becomes a natural skill. In recent decades, neuroscience has rigorously studied meditation. Researchers like Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin discovered that people who meditate regularly show greater activity in the left prefrontal cortex associated with positive emotions and resilience. Moreover, MRI scans have revealed that meditation strengthens the hippocampus, key for memory and learning, and reduces the size of the amygdala, the center of fear and anxiety. In other words, meditating literally reshapes your brain. In 1979, physician John Kabat-Zinn created a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MBSR, for patients with chronic pain. Many had tried all kinds of treatments without success. However, by practicing simple breathing and mindfulness exercises, they began to experience real relief. What was revolutionary was that it wasn't about a magical cure, but about changing the relationship with pain. Instead of fighting against it, patients learned to observe it without resistance. That mental shift transformed their physical experience. Time to clear up. Some misconceptions. Meditation is about emptying the mind. False. The mind always produces thoughts. The goal is to observe them without getting caught up in them. I need a lot of time. With just 5 to 10 minutes a day, you can notice changes. It's not about quantity, but consistency. It's a religious practice. While some traditions include it, meditation itself is a universal technique, like breathing or walking. How to start without complications. You don't need incense, special music, or an expensive cushion, just willingness. Here's a simple 3-step exercise. 1. Find a quiet place. Sit on a chair or on the floor, with your back straight but relaxed. 2. Focus on your breath. Feel the air coming in and out. Don't try to control it, just observe it. 3. Return when distracted. Your mind will wander 1,000 times. Each time you notice it, come back to the breath. That return is the training. Practice for 5 to 10 minutes at first. Over time, you can extend the duration if you wish. Variations to explore. Body scan. Slowly move your attention through each part of your body, noticing sensations. Walking meditation. Pay attention to every step, to the contact of your feet with the ground. Sound meditation. Close your eyes and observe the sounds around you without judgment. Each technique is a way of training your mind to be present. The impact on daily life. The most powerful effect of meditation doesn't happen during the practice, but afterwards. You discover that you react less impulsively, that your mind is clearer, and that you can enjoy simple things more fully. For example, someone criticizes you at work. Before, you might have reacted with immediate anger. After weeks of meditation, you notice the impulse, breathe, and choose to respond calmly. That small difference changes the whole interaction. Imagine your mind is a lake. When it's stirred by the wind, the water is full of waves, and you can't see the bottom. Meditation doesn't eliminate the wind, but it teaches you to wait until the water settles. Then, what was hidden at the bottom becomes visible. Clarity, intuition, and peace. Don't worry about doing it perfectly. Every session, even the most chaotic, is valuable. Simply sitting to observe your mind is already an act of rebellion against constant distraction. As Zen master Shunryu Suzuki said, the most important thing is to remember that meditation is not for improving someone else. It is for improving yourself. Meditation is, at its core, a gift you give yourself, a few minutes each day to reconnect with your own center. Chapter 10. Rewriting Your Personal Story. We all carry within us an invisible narrator. It's that voice that tells you who you are, where you come from, and what you can expect from life. It builds a plot from your memories, your failures, and your achievements, and with that, it creates your story. The problem is that very often this narrator clings to painful chapters or limiting labels and ends up writing a script in which you are the prisoner. But here's the good news. Your story is not carved in stone. You can review it, reinterpret it, and even rewrite it. What you were does not dictate what you will become. Human beings are storytelling animals. Since the days of the caves, we have told stories to understand ourselves and give meaning to the world. Your memories are not exact records of what happened. They are interpretations that you update every time you recall them. In other words, your memory is more malleable than you imagine. A study by neuroscientist Karim Nader showed that when you recall a memory, it becomes vulnerable and can be modified before being stored again. This means that every time you remember an event, in a sense, you are rewriting it. So, why not take advantage of that plasticity to create a story that empowers you instead of limiting you? In 1944, psychologists Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel showed a group of people a short film with simple geometric shapes moving across a screen. Surprisingly, most described the scene as if it were a story. The triangle chases the circle. The square tries to escape. This revealed something fascinating. Our brain needs to give narrative meaning even to the abstract. If it can invent stories with triangles, imagine what it does with your memories. The problem of inherited scripts. Many of the chapters you believe are yours are, in reality, borrowed. Childhood phrases, teachers' criticisms, comparisons with siblings, society's expectations. All of that sneaks into your inner narrator. Examples. I'm bad at math. I'm not made for love. No one in my family ever gets far. These phrases do not describe absolute realities, but interpretations that became scripts. How to rewrite your story. 1. Identify the dark chapters. Write down the memories you repeat the most or the phrases that define you negatively. 2. Question them. Ask yourself, is this a fact or an interpretation? For example, failing an exam is a fact. Saying, I'm a failure, is the interpretation. 3. Find a thread of resilience. Look at how those moments also gave you resources. Perhaps the difficult experience made you stronger, more sensitive, or more creative. 4. Create a new narrative. Write your story from the perspective of a hero who overcomes trials. Instead of, "I failed in business," write, "I learned lessons that now prepare me to undertake with greater wisdom." Practical exercise, your alternative autobiography. Set aside 20 minutes to write your life as if you were the protagonist of an epic novel. Exaggerate your achievements, turn your setbacks into heroic trials, and give it a sense of adventure. It may seem like a game, but it activates new connections in your mind that strengthen your self-confidence. An inspiring metaphor. Think of your story as a book. Some chapters are painful, others thrilling. You cannot tear out pages, but you can write the next ones with a different tone. The key is not to deny the past, but to reinterpret it so that it becomes the foundation for something better. Examples of transformation. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. He could have told himself the story of being a victim of injustice. Instead, he narrated his life as that of a man who transformed suffering into a fight for freedom. Frida Kahlo lived with constant physical pain. Her story could have been one of resignation, but she chose to narrate herself as an artist who turned pain into art. You too can decide from which angle to tell your life. The essential point here is to remind you that you are the author of your personal story. You cannot always control the facts, but you can control the meaning you give them, and that meaning changes both your present and your future. As Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Nazi concentration camps, said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." You are not a fixed character. You are the writer holding the pen. Chapter 11. The Art of Mental Creation. Everything that exists in the physical world first began in someone's mind. A song, a building, an invention, even great social movements. Before becoming reality, they were images and ideas in the mind of a person. That is the art of mental creation, using your imagination not as an escape, but as a laboratory for building futures. The difference between daydreaming and mental creation lies in intention. Daydreaming is letting your mind wander. Mental creation is directing it with purpose, like a painter who chooses each brushstroke to shape his work. The brain doesn't distinguish. A fascinating finding in neuroscience is that the brain responds very similarly to what you imagine and to what you actually experience. When you mentally rehearse an action, you activate the same neural circuits as if you were performing it. Psychologist Alan Richardson, in an experiment with basketball players, divided participants into 3 groups. One practiced free throws physically, another only rehearsed them mentally, and a third did not practice at all. After several weeks, the group that practiced mentally improved almost as much as the one that practiced physically. This demonstrates that mental creation is not fantasy. It is real training. Thomas Edison, the famous inventor, had a curious method to stimulate mental creation. He used to sit in a chair holding metal balls in his hands. As he drifted into sleep, the balls would fall to the floor and wake him up at the precise moment when his mind was in the liminal state between wakefulness and sleep. In that space, where imagination flows without filters, many of his ideas were born. Edison understood what science now confirms, that the mind can be trained to generate new connections and creative solutions. How to practice mental creation. 1. Define clearly what you want. Your brain needs concrete images. Instead of thinking, "I want success," visualize what it looks and feels like to you. 2. Engage all your senses. Imagine not just the image, but also the sounds, smells, and emotions associated with it. The more multisensory, the more real it becomes for your brain. 3. Feel as if it's already true. The key ingredient is emotion. It's not enough to imagine. You need to feel the experience in your body. 4. Repeat consistently. Like any skill, mental creation strengthens with daily practice. Dedicate at least 10 minutes a day. Practical exercise, mental rehearsal. Close your eyes and imagine a situation you want to master. A presentation, an exam, a competition. Visualize yourself doing it calmly and successfully. Notice your posture, your voice, your emotions. Repeat this rehearsal several times. When the real moment comes, your brain will recognize it as something already lived. Mental creation and identity. Here lies the true power. Every time you rehearse mentally, you're not only training an action, but also shaping your identity. If you visualize yourself every day as a confident, creative, and capable person, your brain begins to construct that version of you. Remember that your repeated thoughts are the instructions your mind uses to define who you are. Mental creation is, therefore, a conscious method of choosing which instructions to give. Think of your mind as a carpentry workshop. If you only let random materials in, your work will be chaotic. But if you choose the wood, the tools, and the design, you can build something beautiful and solid. Mental creation is that conscious choice of internal materials. Jim Carrey, when he was an unknown actor, wrote a fictitious check for $10 million for acting services and kept it in his wallet. Years later, he received that very same amount for a film. His mental creation was the seed of his reality. It's not about magic, but about sustained focus and aligned action. The art in your hands. Your mind is a canvas, and every day you paint on it with your thoughts, images, and emotions. The question is, are you painting randomly or with intention? As Goethe once said, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Dare to use the art of mental creation. What you imagine with conviction today can become your reality tomorrow. Chapter 12. Emotions as fuel. Imagine your mind as a state-of-the-art sports car. Powerful, fast, full of possibilities. Now think, what makes it move forward? It's not the design or the wheels, it's the fuel. In your life, that fuel is emotions. Without them, any plan, goal, or learning remains only on paper. Emotions are the spark that turns an idea into action. You can know what you should do, but until you feel it, you won't actually do it. And best of all, although emotions often seem uncontrollable, they can be trained and turned into your greatest driving force. What are emotions? Really? For a long time, emotions were thought to be an irrational nuisance that got in the way of logic. Today, we know they are communication systems between the body and the brain. They act like alarms and compasses. They inform you of what matters, give you energy to act, and leave deep imprints in your memory. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio explained it clearly. We are not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think. In other words, emotion is the foundation of every decision. In 1848, a businessman named Elliot suffered a brain injury that damaged the connection between his prefrontal cortex and his limbic system. The result was surprising. He retained his intelligence intact but lost the ability to feel emotions. The problem? Although he reasoned well, he became incapable of making practical decisions. He would spend hours deciding which pen color to use or which route to take to work. This case showed that emotion is not the enemy of reason, but its ally. Without emotion, reason becomes paralyzed. Each emotion carries an energy load. Anger, for example, mobilizes your body to fight. Sadness invites you to stop and reflect. Joy opens your mind to new connections. There are no bad emotions in themselves. The problem is getting stuck in one without learning how to channel it. A sudden burst of fear can save you from danger, but constant fear locks you in an invisible prison. Brief sadness can help you process a loss, but sustained sadness turns into apathy. The key is learning to read that energy and direct it. How to train your emotions as fuel. 1. Name them. Putting words to what you feel lowers its intensity. Saying "I'm anxious" activates your neocortex and calms your limbic system. 2. Breathe through them. Deep breathing regulates intense emotions because it directly connects with the autonomic nervous system. 3. Redirect the energy. If you feel anger, use it to exercise. If you're sad, write or paint. Turn the emotion into creative action. 4. Cultivate expansive emotions. Gratitude, compassion, and joy have a multiplying effect on health and mental performance. Imagine your emotions as wild horses. If you let them run unchecked, they drag you away. But if you learn to hold the reins, you can gallop powerfully wherever you choose. The emotion doesn't disappear, it transforms into momentum. Inspiring examples. Malala Yousafzai, after surviving an assassination attempt, could have remained in fear. Instead, she turned that emotion into courage to fight for girls' education around the world. Nick Vujicic, born without arms or legs, transformed frustration and sadness into fuel to inspire millions through his talks. Both show that it's not about eliminating painful emotions, but about turning them into constructive energy. Every day, you have micro opportunities to train your emotions. When someone irritates you in traffic, when you receive criticism, when you feel gratitude for a small gesture. If in those moments you consciously choose how to respond, you're strengthening your emotional muscle. The real power. The central message is this: your emotions are not an obstacle. They are your engine. If you learn to recognize them, regulate them, and redirect them, they become the force that propels you to grow. Remember the words of Helen Keller, who, despite being deaf and blind, became a writer and activist. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. Hope, confidence, passion, all are emotions, and all are available to you. It's not about feeling less, but about feeling better. Chapter 13. From Thought to Inspired Action. Surely at some point you found yourself trapped in the world of ideas. You think about projects, dream of goals, get excited about plans, but they never become reality. The distance between thought and action is where most dreams are lost. The challenge is not only to have good ideas, but to turn them into concrete steps. That's where inspired action comes in. It's not about moving out of inertia, but about acting with direction, motivation, and purpose. The trap of procrastination. Your brain is designed to save energy. When an idea arises that requires effort, it activates resistance mechanisms. Better tomorrow. I'm not ready yet. When I have more time. That inner voice, which seems logical, is actually fear disguised as prudence. Inspired action breaks that inertia. It's moving even when everything isn't perfect, trusting that the path will become clear as you go. In 1910, a young pilot named Eugene Ely made the first airplane takeoff from the deck of a ship. No one had done it before. Many called him crazy. The chances of failure were enormous. Yet Ely didn't wait for protocols or guarantees. He tried and opened the door to what we now know as naval aviation. If Ely had waited for the perfect moment, that story might never have been written. His inspired action changed the course of technology. Thinking is not enough. Research by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer shows that having a clear intention does not guarantee following through. What makes the difference are so-called implementation plans, deciding in advance when, where, and how to act. For example, tomorrow at 8 a.m. I will walk for 30 minutes in the park is far more effective than I want to exercise more. Thought provides direction, but action is the bridge to reality. How to move from ideas to inspired action. 1. Define your purpose. Ask yourself why you want to do something. Purpose is the spark that fuels action. 2. Break it down into small steps. A giant goal paralyzes. Break it into action so simple you can't fail. 3. Apply the 2-minute rule. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. This habit destroys procrastination. 4. Celebrate progress, not perfection. Every step counts. What matters is movement, not flawlessness. Inspired action versus impulsive action. Don't confuse inspired action with hurried action. Impulsive action is moving without direction, just to escape discomfort. Inspired action, on the other hand, comes from a clear thought and an aligned emotion. It's like rowing on a river. You can flail your arms aimlessly and get exhausted, or row in the right direction and move forward with flow. Emotion is the fuel that transforms an idea into movement. If you associate your actions with positive emotions, habits consolidate faster. For example, listening to your favorite music while working on a difficult project can anchor pleasure to the task. Practical exercise, the first visible step. Choose a goal you've been postponing. Write it down on paper and then decide, what is the first visible step I can take in less than 24 hours? It could be sending an email, buying a book, making a call. Do it. That minimal action activates the progress circuit and pushes you forward. Imagine your life as a blank canvas. Thinking is like having the colors ready on the palette. But until you put the brush on the canvas, there will be no painting. Inspired action is the first stroke, imperfect, perhaps clumsy, but the beginning of the work. The message of this lesson is clear. Thoughts are seeds, but only action turns them into fruits. You don't need to wait for perfection. You need to take the first step. Remember Goethe's words, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic. Magic happens when you think, feel, and act in the same direction. Chapter 14. The Expansive Mind. Think of your mind as a balloon. With every experience, every lesson, and every emotion, the balloon expands a little more. Now imagine if you consciously decided to inflate it beyond the ordinary. What you would discover is the expansive mind, the ability to go beyond the usual, to open doors to creativity, intuition, and connection with the unknown. This is not a mystical state reserved for a few, but a natural potential we all possess. The expansive mind is simply a brain freed from routine, trained to explore the new, and capable of connecting dots that once seemed impossible to link. Creativity, the art of connecting the unexpected. Creativity doesn't come from nowhere. It's born when your brain connects ideas that once seemed unrelated. As scientist Henri Poincaré said, creativity consists of joining existing elements with new combinations. One example is engineer Georges de Mestral. After a walk in the countryside, he noticed how burrs stuck to his clothes and his dog's fur. That seemingly trivial observation led him to invent Velcro. The everyday became innovation thanks to an expansive mind. Intuition, silent wisdom. The expansive mind also manifests as intuition, that knowing without conscious reasoning. For years, science dismissed it as irrational, But today we know that intuition is the product of millions of micro-experiences stored in your brain. Chess master Garry Kasparov described it this way: "When I see a position on the board, my intuition tells me the right move even before I analyze it." It's not magic. It's the expansive mind accessing information faster than reason can process it. Opening your mind means accepting that you don't have all the answers. In fact, great innovations emerge at the edge of the unknown. Albert Einstein expressed it clearly. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. Accepting mystery doesn't mean surrendering. It means turning curiosity into your compass. The expansive mind dares to explore, even without knowing exactly where the path will lead. Strategies to cultivate an expansive mind. 1. Seek novelty. Every time you try something new, a language, a sport, an art, your brain creates new neural pathways. 2. Combine disciplines. Innovation often arises at intersections. Leonardo da Vinci combined art and science. Today, you might combine technology with philosophy or biology with design. 3. Embrace silence. Many ideas emerge when you disconnect. Walking without music, meditating, or simply sitting in stillness are doors to expansive thinking. 4. Ask improbable questions. Instead of, "What is the right way?" ask, "What would happen if I did it backwards?" In 1968, designer Richard Buckminster Fuller faced personal ruin. He decided then to dedicate his life to answering a single question: what can I do as an individual to improve the life of all humanity? That expansive mindset led him to invent the geodesic dome, lightweight, resilient structures that continue to inspire sustainable architectural solutions today. Fuller wasn't seeking immediate personal gain, but expanding his mind toward a greater purpose. That vision made him a pioneer. The opposite of the expansive mind is the contracted mind, the one that clings to the known, fears mistakes, and repeats the same patterns again and again. This mentality may offer security, but it also robs you of possibilities. Contracted thinking is fed by fear, expansive thinking by curiosity. And like any muscle, what you train grows. Think of your mind as a sky. Contraction is dense clouds that block the view. Expansion is the moment the clouds disperse, revealing that the sky was always wider than you thought. The expansive mind is not only useful for creating or innovating, it also gives you a broader perspective of yourself and your life. It allows you to see problems as opportunities, challenges as lessons, and mysteries as invitations. Remember the words of poet Rainer Maria Rilke: "Live the questions now." Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. Expand your mind, not to have all the answers, but to dare to live within the vastness of the questions. Chapter 15. Your New Reality. You've traveled a long journey. You discovered that your brain is plastic and ever-changing. You learned to recognize the traps of your environment. You understood the power of emotions. You explored the strength of attention and mental creation, and you dared to expand your mind beyond the ordinary. Now it's time to integrate all of this into a new starting point, your new reality. The difference between change and transformation. Change happens when you modify something external, a habit, a job, a routine. Transformation, on the other hand, takes place within you. It's when your identity evolves, and you are no longer the same person you once were. The true goal of unlocking your mental abilities is not just to do more things, but to become someone new, with a different awareness, capable of seeing and living life from another perspective. The power of identity. James Clear, author on habits, explains that the most powerful question is not, "What do I want to achieve?" but, "Who do I want to become?" Because your actions are a reflection of your identity. If you see yourself as a disciplined person, your daily decisions will align with that vision. If you perceive yourself as a creative person, you'll begin to act accordingly. Identity is the glue that holds together your habits and your reality. How to consolidate your new reality. 1. Act as your future self. Every day ask yourself, what would the version of me who has already achieved this goal do? Live from that identity. 2. Create conscious rituals. Small symbolic acts reinforce your transformation. It could be journaling, meditating upon waking, or repeating a personal mantra. 3. Surround yourself with positive mirrors. Seek environments and people who remind you of who you are choosing to be, not who you were. 4. Celebrate micro changes. Don't wait for giant results. Recognize every step as evidence of your new reality. Maintaining growth. Your new reality is not a final destination, but a continuous process. The mind tends to return to what is familiar, which is why you need to remind yourself of who you are now. Each day is an opportunity to reaffirm your expansive identity and consciously choose your path. A practical tip: revisit this book from time to time, not as passive reading, but as an active reminder. Return to the exercises, the questions, the examples. Conscious repetition is what makes transformation last. Think of yourself as a navigator who has learned to read the map of the mind. At first, the waters seemed turbulent and uncontrollable. Now you know how to use the rudder of attention, the engine of your emotions, and the sails of your creativity. The sea will still have storms, but you are no longer a ship adrift. You are the captain of your journey. The new reality you build will depend on how much you commit to your own growth. You don't need to be perfect or have all the answers. The only thing you need is to choose every day to move a little further toward the version of yourself you already envision. As Marianne Williamson said, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, that power is already within you. You felt it in every chapter. Now it's your turn to live it. This book does not end here. What you hold in your hands is not a closed manual, but an open invitation to keep exploring, practicing, and expanding your mental abilities. Your brain, your mind, and your life are more plastic than you ever imagined. Don't settle for merely surviving. Dare to create, transform, and live your new reality to the fullest.